My name is Katie, and I'm an alcoholic. This is the AA Preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting for our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and to help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. I have stated that I am an alcoholic. Are there any other alcoholics present? Yay! Glad you guys are all here. At this time, I've asked Dan to please read a portion of chapter 5.
Hey everybody, Dan Alcoholic. Chapter 5 outwards. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. They are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those too who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you decided what you want, what we have, and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. As some of these we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. Remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for us. But there is one who has all power, and that one is God. May you find him now. Half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon. Here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, properly admitted it. 11, saw through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Many of us exclaimed, "What an order! I can't go through with it." Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is that we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. The spirituals we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A, that we are alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. And C, thanks.
Thank you, Dan. At this time, I have asked Lisa to please read the 12 traditions.
Good evening, Lisa Alcoholic.
Lisa!
The 12 traditions. 1, our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends upon AA unity. 2, for our group purpose, there is but one ultimate authority, a loving God, as he may express himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants. They do not govern. 3, the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking. 4, each group should be autonomous except in matters affecting other groups or AA as a whole. 5, each group has but one primary purpose, to carry the message to the alcoholic who still suffers. 6, an AA group ought never endorse, finance, or lend the AA name to any related facility or outside enterprise, lest problems of money, property, and prestige divert us from our primary purpose. 7, every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. 8, Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional, but our service centers may employ special workers. 9, AA as such ought never be organized, but we may create service boards or committees directly responsible to those they serve. 10, Alcoholics Anonymous has no opinion on outside issues, hence the AA name ought never be drawn into public controversy. 11, our public relations policy is based on attraction rather than promotion. We need always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, and film. And 12, anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. It is now time to observe the seventh tradition. I'll turn it over to Lindsay to do that.
Hi, I am Lindsay. I'm an alcoholic. This is a regular meeting of the Covina and Bismarck groups of Alcoholics Anonymous. Therefore, we are still practicing the seventh tradition, which states that we are fully self-supporting through our own contributions. The money collected continues to pay the bills for our normal meeting calls. And how we are collecting contributions is through Venmo. First Venmo account I will put on the screen is the Covina groups. It is at Covina Speaker. You can open your camera on your phone and scan the image you see on the screen now, and that will take you directly into the Covina Group's Venmo account, which again is at Covina Speaker. In a moment, I'll put North Dakota's Venmo account up on the screen, which is at Founders Group. So same situation, open the camera on your phone, scan the image on the screen, and that will take you directly into North Dakota's Venmo account, which again is at Founders Group. We will also list both of those for you in the chat. If you're not from either area, we hope that your home group is giving you a way to continue to practice the seventh tradition. Another option would be for you to visit aa.org and contribute directly to Alcoholics Anonymous in New York. Thank you so much for your support.
Thank you, Lindsay. And now a special announcement from Debbie.
Oh, it's me again. Hi, everybody. It's Joe. I'm an alcoholic, and it's a great day to be at the Covina group and the North Dakota Bismarck group of Alcoholics Anonymous, where I get to record the speakers and the Big Book study. We've been doing that since the pandemic started. All of the talks are available at amotaudio.com. That's AMOT audio.com. All of them are available for free, and there's a link to the free page in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. So for the last 20 minutes of the meeting, we will have a question and answer session. Our facilitator and some other members will address any questions you may have regarding tonight's reading. In order to have your questions filtered to our facilitator, they must be sent privately to Lynn Delmonte. She will post now in the chat if she hasn't done so already, so you guys know where to send them. As soon as you have questions during the meeting, feel free to send them to her as they come up. Any questions in the main chat will not be addressed, so make sure you send them directly to Lynn. This is the foreword as it appeared in the first printing of the first edition in 1939. We of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. To show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. Tonight we are on page 171, I think, and to lead us through the book is tonight's leader, Carl.
Thank you, Katie. My name's Carl. I'm an alcoholic. I want to welcome everybody to this particular meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. What we do at this meeting is we read the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, page by page, paragraph by paragraph, line by line, in an effort to try to find out what the book is actually trying to say to us. It is our experience over the years that we found that if we want to live comfortably sober long-term, that we need to dive in and see what the book is actually trying to say to us. And how this meeting does that is we have Lindsay will be reading, and I will be interrupting her a lot, except tonight I might not be interrupting quite so much as Dr. Bob's story we're getting into, I will interrupt a little bit, but not as much as normal. And I just throw out ideas to get maybe the new people to start thinking about what the literature is actually saying. The stuff that I'm saying, I do not expect that you need to agree with. You might not. But whether you agree or not, if you form an opinion, that means you have actually given it some thought. And that means this meeting has actually been a success. If we can just get you to give a little thought to what the literature is actually trying to say. This meeting has been running in this format for well over a quarter of a century. Boy, when I say that, I feel old. Let me look at myself. Yep, I'm old. Yep, been doing this for well over a quarter century in this format of having readers and me interrupting them. And we normally hold this in our normal meeting hall in Covina. And about 7-8 years ago, I'm not positive, Judith might remember exactly the date. I think it's like 2014. We connected Bismarck, North Dakota with Covina by using the FaceTime technology. So we could connect the two rooms, and so we've been doing that. So this sort of fit on Zoom was absolutely easy and perfect and no problem. All right, we are moving into Dr. Bob's Nightmare, but there's a couple of pages before that, Lindsay, that we might want to read. There's very little writing on them, but I think we should read those. It's starting right on page 165, where it starts with personal stories, and then over to the table of contents of the stories, and then the page describing part one. Then we'll move into Dr. Bob's Nightmare. You notice at the very beginning, right after the doctor's opinion, we had Bill's story, one of our co-founder stories, and we're sort of bookending the 164 pages with both stories of our founders. I bet you there was some thought put into whether they put both those stories at the beginning, Bill's story followed by Bob's story, or are they going to put it in the back? And I think they made the right decision. If we would add two stories in the beginning, many of us alcoholics might not have ever made it past two stories and gotten into the meat of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. So it's probably a wise thing. Maybe there wasn't even that much thought. Who knows? But anyway, Lindsay, let's start right there on page 165, titled Personal Stories.
Personal stories. How 42 alcoholics recovered from their malady. Beginning with the story of Dr. Bob, a co-founder of AA, there are here presented 3 groups of personal histories. Part 1, Pioneers of AA. This group of 10 stories shows that sobriety in AA can be lasting. Part 2, They stopped in time. 17 stories may help you decide whether you are alcoholic, also whether AA is for you. Part 3, They lost nearly all. Those who believe their drinking to be hopeless may again find hope in these 15 impressive tales.
Okay, remember, if in the forwards to the first, second, and third and fourth edition, they often talk about there was a lot of changes that were made, and a lot of those changes were made here in the personal stories, not in the first 164 pages of the big book. But they did indeed replace and take out stories in all parts of part 1, part 2, and part 3. And there's various reasons why they did that. One of the main reasons, if we remember, was to better reflect the growing and rapid membership of Alcoholics Anonymous, to try to give as much of a diverse, eclectic bunch of personal stories to reflect how diverse and eclectic Alcoholics Anonymous became. It wasn't diverse and eclectic in the beginning. It was kind of just a bunch of old white guys. Now, I know some people still think AA is full of a bunch of old white guys, but actually the truth is, especially if you live in Los Angeles, you just drive a few miles down the freeway and you find out that is not true. If you do just a little traveling around the world, you find out that is not true. We are absolutely wide-reaching. Okay.
Part 1, Pioneers of AA. Dr. Bob and the 9 men and women who here tell their stories were among the early members of AA's first groups. All 10 have now passed away of natural causes, having maintained complete sobriety. Today, hundreds of additional AA members can be found who have had no relapse for more than 50 years. All of these, then, are the pioneers of AA. They bear witness that release from alcoholism can really be permanent.
There's a little thing to notice. They have the blank page on the left, and then you turn over and another blank page. They seem to really wanted to make sure that this part 1, Pioneers of AA, had its own page over on the right-hand side. Now, I'm not sure whether they just felt that gave it more pronunciation, or maybe because remember, they were wanting this book to be thicker in the beginning, because back in those days, in the 1930s, 1940s, a book that was substantial, that people would recognize, would be a substantial size book. For whatever the reason, it was thought that way. So it might have been a combination of both of those things, that they added an extra couple of pages there. All right, let's move right into Dr. Bob's Nightmare.
Dr. Bob's Nightmare, a co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. The birth of our society dates from his first day of permanent sobriety, June 10th, 1935. To 1950, the year of his death, he carried the AA message to more than 5,000 alcoholic men and women, and to all these he gave his medical services without thought of charge. In this prodigy of service, he was well assisted by Sister Ignatia at St. Thomas Hospital in Akron, Ohio, one of the greatest friends our fellowship will ever know.
All right, so these italics gave quite a bit. I remember I said I wasn't going to interrupt a lot, but boy, I'm already interrupting a lot, aren't I? But anyway, those italics give you quite a bit of history right off the bat, doesn't it? Right there, it tells us that number 1, Dr. Bob is a co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. We always view Bill and Bob as co-founders. One would think that, Ebby should have been in there, but Ebby never stayed sober. So he kind of lost that position. And I bet you anything, I bet he had a lot of resentments about that. I always feel for Ebby Thatcher, in his later years, as he went in and out of AA all over the country. I can just picture Ebby showing up at some meeting, right, down in Texas or down in Arkansas or wherever he may have traveled, and them treating him like he's new, and him saying, no, I actually started this thing. And the people in the room kind of going, yeah, sure, buddy. Sure you did. Sure, you settle down, have a cup of coffee, try not to talk too much. And no, really, I did. I can just, oh God, I feel for that guy. I just feel for that dilemma that he probably had. Anyway, so Dr. Bob is a co-founder, and the birth of our society dates from his first day of permanent sobriety. Remember, he after meeting Bill for the first time at the gatehouse of the Cyberling estate, he was sober a few days, and then he went on that trip, and then he found his permanent sobriety date. And if somebody were to ask, well, why wouldn't we do it from Bill's sobriety date back in December of 1934? I think December 11th of 1930. Why wouldn't that be that's the beginning? No. Alcoholics Anonymous does not happen until there's 2 people. So there's a lesson to be learned in that. Sobriety really doesn't really mean much until there's another. It's the idea we aren't really here for our own sobriety. Yes, I get it in the beginning, but not really. I kind of view that when I'm working with somebody, that I don't feel like AA has really transpired between us until the phone calls change from, Carl, I've got this problem and I got this problem. I need help with this problem, Carl. And this third problem I have has subsets A, B, and C. And we'll get to that in a minute. Try not to fall asleep, but I got a lot of problems, Carl, right? When the phone calls change from that to this, hey, Carl, I'm now working with a new guy and I wanted to bounce something off you before I engaged him over a couple of problems he brought to me. Right then, I feel Alcoholics Anonymous has transpired between me and that fellow. That's when I think it, and so that's kind of, our history shows that too. There was no AA until there were two of us. So that's why we celebrated on June 10th, 1935, which was what we believe is Dr. Bob's permanent sobriety day. They also show that Dr. Bob obviously was an intense worker with others. I don't think that they are talking about these 5,000 people he worked with. I don't think that that's where he was speaking and doing large workshops. We're talking one-on-one here. That it's strongly believed that Dr. Bob worked one-on-one with this many people, and that's impressive. That is really impressive. And then it also points out Sister Ignatia at St. Thomas Hospital in Akron, which you can go visit. You can absolutely go visit that. You can see this room that is dedicated. It's actually a whole section, a chapel and a whole hallway that is dedicated to the work that was done there back in the 1930s and early 40s. And that's sort of like these days, if you're an AAer and you have close friends at the hospital, at the local detox, and you communicate with them a lot, trying to find people to work with, that is exactly would be today's version of the way Dr. Bob and Sister Ignatia and St. Thomas Hospital worked in order to gain access and bring an alcoholic to be worked with by the AA members. They would be detoxing them. The AA members would come and get to know them a little bit. Sister Ignatia would set up that relationship. And you know, I would advise you guys to get to know your local director of the local detox. Find out who runs across the alcoholics that go through your local hospital, and make friends with them. Let them know who you are. All right, so just a little piece of history there. Now we can go right into Dr. Bob's story.
I was born in a small New England village of about 7,000 souls. The general morale standard was, as I recall it, far above the average. No beer or liquor was sold in the neighborhood, except at the state liquor agency, where perhaps one might procure a pint if he could convince the agent that he really needed it. Without this proof, the expectant purchaser would be forced to depart empty-handed, with none of what I later came to believe was the great panacea for all human ills. Men who had liquor shipped in from Boston or New York by express were looked upon with great distrust and disfavor by most of the good townspeople. The town was well supplied with churches and schools in which I pursued my early educational activities. My father was a professional man of recognized ability, and both my father and mother were most active in church affairs. Both father and mother were considerably above the average in intelligence. Unfortunately for me, I was the only child, which perhaps engendered the selfishness which played such an important part in bringing on my alcoholism. From childhood through high school, I was more or less forced to go to church, Sunday school and evening service, Monday night Christian Endeavor, and sometimes to Wednesday evening prayer meeting. This had the effect of making me resolve that when I was free from parental domination, I would never again darken the doors of a church. This resolution I kept steadfastly for the next 40 years, except when circumstances made it seem unwise to absent myself. After high school came 4 years in one of the best colleges in the country, where drinking seemed to be a major extracurricular activity. Almost everyone seemed to do it. I did it more and more and had lots of fun without much grief, either physical or financial. I seemed to be able to snap back the next morning better than most of my fellow drinkers, who were cursed, or perhaps blessed, with a great deal of morning after nausea. Never once in my life have I had a headache, which fact leads me to believe that I was an alcoholic almost from the start. My whole life seemed to be centered around doing what I wanted to do without regard for the rights, wishes, or privileges of anyone else, a state of mind which became more and more predominant as the years passed. I was graduated summa cum laude in the eyes of the drinking fraternity, but not in the eyes of the dean. The next 3 years I spent in Boston, Chicago, and Montreal in the employ of a large manufacturing concern, selling railway supplies, gas engines of all sorts, and many other items of heavy hardware. During these years, I drank as much as my purse permitted, still without paying too great a penalty, although I was beginning to have morning jitters at times. I lost only a half day's work during these 3 years. My next move was to take up the study of medicine, entering one of the largest universities in the country. There I took up the business of drinking with much greater earnestness than I had previously shown. On account of my enormous capacity for beer, I was elected to membership in one of the drinking societies and soon became one of the leading spirits. Many mornings I have gone to classes and even though fully prepared, would turn and walk back to the fraternity house because of my jitters, not daring to enter the classroom for fear of making a scene should I be called on for a recitation.
I want to interrupt just for 1 second, Lindsay, and just simply to get some people to notice, he's a physician. He's now talking about fraternities, education, family. Notice that he centers, while he's telling his story, he is indeed making reference to all of these things he's doing, but he does it all in the context of his drinking. That should give us a hint how maybe we are supposed to tell our stories in Alcoholics Anonymous. If you follow that, you see that indeed you get the picture that what type of family he's from, went to church a lot, religious background, obviously very involved in the school he was going to, the fraternity, all of that. And you'll see it later in there, but he does this in a very artful way, which he does this all he tells the story completely in the context of his drinking. He's telling an alcoholic story. And it's just a little hint for a lot of us when we wonder, how am I supposed to share? But I'm supposed to talk for 15 minutes. Well, tell an alcoholic story. And you can look at the way they do that, do here, and kind of copy it. I think this one he's just brilliant in the way he does that. Okay.
This went from bad to worse until sophomore spring when, after a prolonged period of drinking, I made up my mind that I could not complete my course, so I packed my grip and went south to spend a month on a large farm owned by a friend of mine. When I got the fog out of my brain, I decided that quitting school was very foolish and that I had better return and continue my work. When I reached school, I discovered the faculty had other ideas on the subject. After much argument, they allowed me to return and take my exams, all of which I passed creditably. But they were much disgusted and told me they would attempt to struggle along without my presence. After many painful discussions, they finally gave me my credits and I migrated to another of the leading universities of the country and entered as a junior that fall. There, my drinking became so much worse that the boys in the fraternity house where I lived felt forced to send for my father, who made a long journey in the vain endeavor to get me straightened around. This had little effect, for I kept on drinking and used a great deal more hard liquor than in former years. Coming up to final exams, I went on a particularly strenuous spree. When I went in to write the examinations, my hand trembled so I could not hold a pencil. I passed in at least 3 absolutely blank books. I was, of course, soon on the carpet, and the upshot was that I had to go back for 2 more quarters and remain absolutely dry if I wished to graduate. This I did and proved myself satisfactory to the faculty, both in deportment and scholastically. Okay, thanks. I conducted myself so creditably that I was able to secure a much coveted internship in a Western city where I spent 2 years. During these 2 years, I was kept so busy that I hardly left the hospital at all. Consequently, I could not get into any trouble. When those 2 years were up, I opened an office downtown. I had some money, all the time in the world, and considerable stomach trouble. I soon discovered that a couple of drinks would alleviate my gastric distress, at least for a few hours at a time, so it was not at all difficult for me to return to my former excessive indulgence. By this time, I was beginning to pay very dearly physically and, in hope of relief, voluntarily incarcerated myself at least a dozen times in one of the local sanitariums. I was between Skyla and Cardis now. Yeah, we'll just go on. Okay, because if I did not drink, my stomach tortured me, and if I did, my nerves did the same thing. After 3 years of this, I wound up in the local hospital where they attempted to help me, but I would get my friends to smuggle me a quart, or I would steal the alcohol about the building so that I got rapidly worse. Finally, my father had to send a doctor out from my hometown who managed to get me back there in some way, and I was in bed about 2 months before I could venture out of the house. I stayed about town a couple of months more and then returned to resume my practice. I think I must have been thoroughly scared by what had happened, or by the doctor, or probably both, so that I did not touch a drink again until the country went dry. With the passing of the 18th Amendment, I felt quite safe. I knew everyone would buy a few bottles or cases of liquor as their exchequers permitted, and that it would soon be gone. Therefore, it would make no great difference, even if I should do some drinking. At that time, I was not aware of the almost unlimited supply the government made it possible for us doctors to obtain, neither had I any knowledge of the bootlegger who soon appeared on the horizon. I drank with moderation at first, but it took me only a relatively short time to drift back into the old habits, which had wound up so disastrously before. During the next few years, I developed two distinct phobias. One was the fear of not sleeping, and the other was the fear of running out of liquor. Not being a man of means, I knew that if I did not stay sober enough to earn money, I would run out of liquor. Most of the time, therefore, I did not take the morning drink which I craved so badly, but instead would fill up on large doses of sedatives to quiet the jitters, which distressed me quite terribly. Occasionally, I would yield to the morning craving, but if I did, it would be only a few hours before I would be quite unfit for work. This would lessen my chances of smuggling some home that evening, which in turn would mean a night of futile tossing around in bed, followed by a morning of unbearable jitters. During the subsequent 15 years, I had sense enough never to go to the hospital if I had been drinking, and very seldom did I receive patients. I would sometimes hide out in one of the clubs of which I was a member, and had the habit at times of registering at a hotel under a fictitious name. But my friends usually found me, and I would go home if they promised that I should not be scolded. If my wife was planning to go out in the afternoon, I would get a large supply of liquor and smuggle it home and hide it in the coal bin, the clothes chute, over door jambs, over beams in the cellar, and in cracks in the cellar tile. I also made use of old trunks and chests, the old can container, and even the ash container. The water tank on the toilet I never used because that looked too easy. I found out later that my wife inspected it frequently. I used to put 8 or 12-ounce bottles of alcohol in a fur-lined glove and toss it onto the back airing porch when winter days got dark enough. My bootlegger had hidden alcohol on the back steps where I could get it at my convenience. Sometimes I would bring it in my pockets, but they were inspected and that became too risky. I used to put it up in 4-ounce bottles and stick several in my stocking tops. This worked nicely until my wife and I went to see Wallace Beery and Tugboat Annie, after which the pant leg and stocking racket were out. I will not take space to relate all my hospital or sanitarium experiences. During all this time, we became more or less ostracized by our friends. We could not be invited out because I would surely get tight, and my wife dared not invite people in for the same reason. My phobia for sleeplessness demanded that I get drunk every night, but in order to get more liquor for the next night, I had to stay sober during the day, at least up to 4 o'clock. This routine went on with few interruptions for 17 years. It was really a horrible nightmare. This earning money, getting liquor, smuggling it home, getting drunk, morning jitters, taking large doses of sedatives to make it possible for me to earn more money, and so on ad nauseam. I used to promise my wife, my friends, and my children that I would drink no more. Promises which seldom kept me sober even through the day, though I was very sincere when I made them. For the benefit of those experimentally inclined, I should mention the so-called beer experiment. When beer first came back, I thought that I was safe. I could drink all that I wanted of that. It was harmless. Nobody ever got drunk on beer. So I filled the cellar full with the permission of my good wife. It was not long before I was drinking at least a case and a half a day. I put on 30 pounds of weight in about 2 months, looked like a pig, and was uncomfortable from shortness of breath. It then occurred to me that after one was all smelled up with beer, nobody could tell what had been drunk. So I began to fortify my beer with straight alcohol. Of course, the result was very bad, and that ended the beer experiment. About the time of the beer experiment, I was thrown in with a crowd of people who attracted me because of their seeming poise, health, and happiness. They spoke with great freedom from embarrassment, which I could never do, and they seemed very much at ease on all occasions and appeared very healthy. More than these attributes, they seemed to be happy. I was self-conscious and ill at ease most of the time. My health was at the breaking point, and I was thoroughly miserable. I sensed that they had something I did not have, from which I might readily profit. I learned that it was something of a spiritual nature, which did not appeal to me very much, but I thought it could do no harm. I gave the matter much time and study for the next 2.5 years, but I still got tight every night nevertheless. I read everything I could find and talked to everyone who I thought knew anything about it. My wife became deeply interested, and it was her interest that sustained mine, though I at no time sensed that it might be an answer to my liquor problem. How my wife kept her faith and courage during all those years, I'll never know, but she did. If she had not, I know I would have been dead a long time ago. For some reason, we alcoholics seem to have the gift of picking out the world's finest women. Why they should be subjected to the tortures we inflict upon them, I cannot explain.
Okay, Lindsay, first of all, we should give Lindsay a giant round of applause for amazing, goodness sakes, that she should be out of breath by now. But I didn't, again, as we went along, especially on Dr. Bob's story, it's such a good, well-told story. I don't like to interrupt and analyze everything, because a big part of listening or reading an alcoholic story is getting wrapped up in it and sort of feeling the flow and identifying with it, instead of me jumping in and throwing out ideas. I've had a couple of friends texting me factual information about various things that were mentioned going on. But I thought, I was actually enjoying reading the story too. There's nothing I enjoy better than an alcoholic story. I really do. I just love to listen and read alcoholic stories. And Dr. Bob's is a great one. So I think we're going to stop here. Hopefully some questions came across, but if not, I will use the panel to discuss things about Dr. Bob and the work that he did, if we indeed did not somehow generate questions during the reading. But again, I really want to thank Lindsay for doing that. We're about ready. So next week we will be moving right into the part where Dr. Bob is getting sober, and there's just a couple of pages, and there is quite a bit to look at over the next couple of pages, and that's another reason I wanted to stop here to have more time, because we're really at just a couple of minutes before we normally stop with the panel. So I see Judith has moved into KD's square, and we're going to have we got Steve Lamb and Bill Cleveland and Jerry Shamalis that we're going to be here on this panel. All right, so I will ask Lynn, are there any questions tonight?
Hi, Carl. Yes, there are a couple of questions. I'm Lynn. I'm an alcoholic. The first one on page 172, it said, never once in my life have I had a headache, which fact leads me to believe that I was an alcoholic almost from the start. Does that mean that if you don't get headaches from alcohol, or you don't get the normal signs of alcohol, that you probably are an alcoholic?
Let's go over to see if Bill can tear this apart.
I'm Bill, I'm alcoholic. No, that's not true. And every time I hear about alcoholics that never had headaches or hangovers, like my wife has never thrown up, and I suffered horribly. A lesser man would have died much sooner than I did. It's like, I don't know what that's about. There are some alcoholics that don't suffer from hangovers, and I suffered from them horribly. And one of the things I learned when I got into Alcoholics Anonymous was I should have drank more in the morning. I don't know why I didn't do that. I would just be so sick in the morning, I'd have to lay off. Like when you hear alcoholics talk about I drank every day, I couldn't pull that off. That's what drugs are for, in between resting up while you're getting ready to drink again, So good old Bob, evidently he didn't suffer, but he also talks about being in institutions many times. So he had some drawback to his drinking, but if you don't get headaches, that doesn't mean you're alcoholic. That just means that you're special.
Thank you.
All right, what else we got, Lynn?
On page 175, it says, I was between Sicilla and Charybdis now. What does Sicilla and Charybdis mean?
That definitely sounds like a Steve Lamb question. And first of all, Steve, why don't you pronounce them for us too?
Yes.
Steve Lamb alcoholic. It's Scylla and Charbitus. And I too never threw up, ever, not once when I drank. I did poop my pants with alarming regularity, which was an issue, but I never, ever threw up. Now, Scylla and Charbitus, Scylla is actually a large rock, a promontory rock between the island of Sicily and Italy. And right off Scylla, there is something called Charbitus, which is a whirlpool. And mariners, ancient mariners used to get caught between that rock and the whirlpool, and they would wreck their ships. So when they say they're between Scylla and Charbitus, that's like between a rock and a hard place.
I knew he would have the perfect answer. All right.
He's good to have around.
I know he is. He's absolutely good to have around. What else we got, Lynn?
When do the cravings go away and the using dreams?
Judith?
I have no idea. It's all individual. Dr. Bob talks about the mental obsession, cravings. I don't really want to, if that's what the person is talking about, the mental obsession, because I crave alcohol when I ingest alcohol. Physically, I crave it. I trigger that abnormal physical reaction and I crave more and more and more. Although I don't recognize it as craving, I just think I'm changing my mind. But the mental obsession, Dr. Bob talked about suffering with it for 2 years, I believe it was 2. And I would be very similar to Dr. Bob. I always heard people that said, and then they came into Alcoholics Anonymous and the mental obsession was removed immediately. And I always thought that meant I had done something wrong or that I wasn't working a good program, because my mental obsession did not leave until well into my 2nd year, which just meant I had to work all the harder in my program on a daily basis. So that's how I would explain that. The drinking dreams, once in a while, I've been sober 12 years and I'll have one. I don't get upset about it. I don't freak out about it. I don't make a bunch of drama about it. My sponsor just says it's a gift. It's a very inexpensive gift to remind me what my life could be like and will be like again if I do not work this program to the best of my ability on a daily basis. It just reminds me of why I do what I do and why I work so hard. So it's a gift.
Excellent. I agree with everything Judith said. I'm gonna throw in my 2 cents on the drinking dreams. I actually think drinking dreams are a sign that you are indeed wrestling with step 1. You are wrestling with the idea of recovery. And the reason I believe that is, did you ever have drinking dreams when you were drinking? No, only when you are wrestling with the idea that we can't drink. And dreams mirror my subconscious. And so I believe it's my subconscious mirroring the inner turmoil of surrendering to alcoholism. And as Judith said, it's such a gift when you come out of one of those and you realize, I did. It was only a dream. Oh, I've still got my 60 days. And that sense of relief, I mean, it really is a huge thing. So I think it actually is a gift, and it actually is a sign of recovery. It doesn't mean you're in the game. It means you're wrestling with the idea of getting in the game. And then also later on, I only get them about once a year at most. And it is the reminder. It is the reminder. All right, what do we got for Jerry?
I've been told I'm worried about how much you help others, and the big book talks about self-care. Where does it talk about self-care, and is it truly possible to help others too much?
Jerry?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I think by helping others, I am implementing perhaps one of the greatest forms of self-care that I can take action on, which is to be of service to others. And this self-care has kind of just shown up in the last, 4 or 5 years. And as Judith was pointing out, I have to really lean into the light of Alcoholics Anonymous, the actions of Alcoholics Anonymous, the love and service that is the essence of our program. And the more I do, the better I feel. The more action that I take, and there is a point at which you have to sometimes have a little balance. I'm not suggesting that we go overboard, but I try to never say no to an AA request. I try to go the extra mile with the people that I sponsor. And I want to repeat what I said because we have a lot of new people here in the meeting. The greatest form of self-care that I can do for Jerry Shamalis is to serve you and to be of service to the newcomer and the people that I sponsor, because I get a wonderful feeling by getting out of self. And so I would say that it's very difficult to do too much in Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean, you want to definitely have a certain degree of balance, but I would be inclined to say the more I do, the better I feel. The more actions that I take, the more self-care I implement in my personal life, and the better husband, the better employer, the better person that I am. And there's an old saying that I heard when I was in London from a guy with 40 plus years of sobriety: when things aren't working, do more. So I think it's a beautiful thing to have this process in AA to be of service. And the more you do it, the better you feel. That's my experience.
I could not agree more, and I'm not sure the big book says anywhere those two words are not put next to each other. Self-care in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I understand the concept, but I agree with everything Jerry said. He worded it so beautifully that sort of turned it around on us. But the only place that AA talks about self is not always in a good light. It's like avoid, right? Get out of self, not into self, out of self. So, you got anything else, Lynn?
Yes, we've gotten quite a few questions actually.
Oh, good.
What group was it that Dr. Bob talked about moving with on page 178?
You know what? I think I'm going to go back to Steve Lamb with this. He's always the historian there.
That was the Oxford group, and the Oxford group was really one of the founding genesis for Alcoholics Anonymous. The New York group left the Oxford group around 37, and the Dr. Bob and the Akronites left somewhere around November or December of 1939, and then it actually became more formally Alcoholics Anonymous.
Okay, we got anything else?
Carl,
Yes.
can I jump in on that?
You can, you most certainly can.
I think that little section is an outstanding little hidden inventory that we can use. I mean, when you look at it, it says, a crowd of people who attracted me because of their seeming poise, health, and happiness. You know, is that me today in recovery? They spoke with great freedom from embarrassment. They seemed very much at ease on all occasions and appeared very healthy. More than these attributes, they seem to be happy. Is that what our AA groups are like? Is that what my home group is like? That seems like such a great description of the spirit of AA and how we transform in recovery. And it's just a great little inventory, I think.
Thank you. I agree.
Thank you. The next question is, if Dr. Bob was taking sedatives in between drunks, would he upon sobriety steer clear of sedatives?
Bill?
Yes, I believe so. One of the controversies you get in AA is we shouldn't talk about drugs. They should have told Dr. Bob that. They should have told Bill that when Bill gave him a couple of goofballs and a bottle of beer when he went to perform surgery on the day that he finally got sober. I think the drug addicts have been destroying Alcoholics Anonymous since right around 1935. You know, and, you know, one of the spiritual truths too is that, you know, alcohol plus money equals cocaine. And that's what cocaine's for, is so that alcoholics can drink more. I don't mean to be controversial here, but there you have it. But I do believe afterwards, I mean, another, just a quick aside, my dad got sober in 1954. And when he kind of came back around to AA when I got sober in 85 and he started showing up to the men's stag, people would ask him, what do you see the difference is between back in those days and now? And one of the things he says, it used to really bother him as he was coming up through AA as the years went by, when people started coming in and talking about drugs and foul language and stuff. And it kind of caused him to drift away a little bit from AA. When he came back in and he started hanging around with us, he says it's really clear now what sobriety is. Sobriety is everything. No pot, no pills, because he would watch guys taking birthday cakes in AA meetings just loaded on Milltown, you know, the Valium of the day. And people couldn't talk about that. You couldn't say anything about that. And with us now, it's really clear what sobriety is. And so I would think, yes, especially those guys would have decided they're not going to take any downers, you know, now that they're not drinking. I think that was implicit in it. And one other thing quickly, the Oxford Group is still around today. They still exist. They changed their name from the Oxford Group to Moral Rearmament just before World War II. And it is now, sometime in the 60s, they changed it to Initiatives of Change. And it's still very vibrant and active around the world. And I've been to their headquarters in Co, Switzerland with my sponsor, who spent some time there with them. I've had Oxford Group meetings here in my house, you know, so they're still around. And they're very aware that they are one of the foundations of Alcoholics Anonymous. They're very, very proud of that, you know.
Nice. Excellent.
And
Anything
then-
else, Lynn?
Yes. Why can a person drink normally one day and the next few times you go way overboard and can't stop?
Jerry?
The only time that I would try to drink normally was when I had a little heat on me. Because I was not really very capable of drinking or taking any kind of mind-altering chemical with any level of normalcy. I think that certain alcoholics might, we do have periodics. For example, Chuck Chamberlain would be sober for 2 or 3 weeks and then would go on a bender. So I think there's certain types of alcoholics that can manifest their illness in all kinds of unique way, or not unique, but in different ways. So I don't think that, you know, there are some people that can go on the wagon, white knuckling it for a while, and then they relapse and have a much deeper fall or more accelerated progression of their illness after being off alcohol for a while. But I think it's not that common at the end stage of my alcoholism, unless I had some heat on me or people observing me, that I could drink with any level of looking like I wasn't doing it full court press, pedal to the metal style, because that's certainly the way it was at the end.
Yeah, and I agree 100%. And I think that what I just like to throw in there is, that's why there's so many stories in the book. That's why there's so many different speaker meetings. If everybody's alcoholism story was exactly the same and the progression was exactly the same, we would just have 1 or 2 stories and say, here's what it does. But in every person, it manifests itself differently. And so if you're questioning and trying to compare based upon one person's alcoholism, you're gonna compare yourself out of it. Really, I would really take down the defenses. And I'm not saying the person that wrote this question is, I'm just saying in general, take down the defenses, stop debating, quit trying to figure out how I'm not like that person. I can read Dr. Bob's Nightmare and I wasn't even born when he died, right? Very different type of story, but I can identify with him 100%. Because I put myself in the frame of mind to look for identification instead of looking for loopholes. Okay.
Okay, and there are many AA meetings who say if your problem is anything other than alcohol, you should go somewhere else, or you can't talk about it in an AA meeting. But Dr. Bob talks about using sedatives in his story, and Bill also talks about drugs in his story. So what do you guys think about that?
I'm going to throw in 30 seconds, then I'm going to turn it over to Judith. I just think that we need to be, what the Society of Alcoholics Anonymous wants us to do is to tell an alcoholic story, and we are free to mention drugs. They are asking us not to tell a drug addict story and reluctantly kind of sort of make mention of alcohol. That's what they're asking us to do. We can mention drugs while telling an alcoholic story all we want. And I think any idea that we can't even mention it does not serve our society well. Judith?
I think that's a fantastic answer. I would also like to point out that in those stories, it's like one sentence in the entire story, which goes to what you're saying, Carl. It's an alcoholic story with a brief mention of drugs. When I am sharing my story, I will briefly mention, because it has some significance in how my story ends, that I also used cocaine. But it's a footnote in the story. In Alcoholics Anonymous, we have a singleness of purpose that we must protect. It's one alcoholic identifying with another alcoholic. And if you identify as something else, while you're welcomed in open meetings, we only do one thing and one thing well, and that is alcoholism. But we can sure find you where the group of people are that can help you with whatever you identify with. So we must protect the people who identify with other issues, and we also need to protect the singleness of purpose of alcoholism, Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yep. But if you're both, take a seat. If you're an alcoholic and take a seat, you don't need to go anywhere. But if you are absolutely not alcoholic, for sure, no relationship to alcohol in any way, shape, or form, no part of your life, then absolutely, our job is then to find you the right seat to be in. But if you're alcoholic and something, join the club. I would like to, I've got about 70 people on my screen. How many people drank and did drugs? Yep, I only see 2 hands that didn't go up out of about 70. So you're safe. You're good. Hang out. I think we're out of time. Thank you very much. I love you guys, and I appreciate you guys being here.
The drug bone is connected to the drink bone.